Bianca Cotton, host of Behind the Confident Smile, where we inspire women to walk in love, live in hope, and be healed from past hurts. And today we are in for a treat, you all. I am joined by the lovely Janice Nelson, where we'll be talking about her journey to graduating college at the age of 40 and being a mom of 6 and a wife. Okay. Welcome, Janice.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to be here.
Of course. So we're going to zoom into that moment where you walked across the stage, diploma in hand. What did that feel like in your 40s?
It actually was a very emotional moment. It was filled of sadness and happiness because as I was sitting down watching people's names being called and they was going across the stage and waiting for my role to stand up and for my opportunity to go across the stage, I started sitting here because it was in a very small place and it was a very small class. And so in my head, I started seeing this massive graduation that I should have had 20 years ago when I did school back then, and then it was like this idea of you settling. You see, you settle. And so it's like I was battling this negative thought at this very monumental, happy moment. And so it's like I had to shake it and realize that it's okay. You did it. And you're about to walk across the stage. Soon you're about to stand up, go up and walk across the stage. Then I started judging the stage. You see that little tiny stage you're about to walk across? All it's going to do is take 5 steps and you're going to be gone across when you could have had a grand stage with thousands of graduates. And I literally had to mentally shake myself like, stop. You earned this. You worked for this. So what? It's a small stage. So what? It's going to take you 5 to 6 steps and you're going to be, over. So when I finally shook out of it, then the excitement and the joy came. And so, to finally stand up, go in front, wait for them to call my name. And walk across and get my diploma and stand there and take my picture, it was all worth it. And I was excited. So it was huge, once I got out of my head.
Yeah. Let's talk about that it sounded like you were judging yourself or even felt shame in a sense for the vision that you thought should have been but wasn't. Why was that?
I guess in my head, I should have did it back then, but that's just not how my life played out. And then it was an online school, so then it was like, did you really go to a real school? Is this a real diploma? It was just all of these different thoughts, before then it was just even the fear of finishing because I had been to school multiple times and didn't finish. So now I finished. So I don't know what really caused it, but it was just that, judging everything. Like I'm finally here, but now I can't fully enjoy it because I'm judging how the outcome was. There's an online school, the arena, and that was a beautiful place that we had the graduation, but it was small. The stage was small. Is my degree going to be acceptable, like if it was from a big university, but yeah, it was just emotional, very emotional.
So when you say you should have done this back then and finished already, how long ago would you say you should have crossed the stage, and what happened to impact your ability to not finish at that time?
Okay, so I graduated high school in 1999.
You guys 1999.
Right, y'all do the math. So, and I went straight to school. I went to school in Michigan. And my freshman year, I did pretty well. My sophomore year, I struggled. And so I ended up having to leave school because I was put on academic probation due to some classes that I was struggling with, and just couldn't get the help I needed. And I didn't have, so I lost my scholarships, and I didn't have the money to try to pay to stay in school. So I came back home. So I would say the winter of 2000. So after, when I left for Christmas break, my sophomore year, I didn't return back to school. And so when I came home, I immediately enrolled in Harold Washington College because I just knew I wanted my degree. I ended up changing my major because when I was in Michigan, my major was computer information system. And it took one class to realize that is not my specialty at all. And instead of being smart enough to drop it, I got to finals, didn't take my final because what for? I knew I was going to fail it. So I didn't even show up for finals. And when I went back home, I changed my major to education.
Okay.
So I started going with Harold Washington and was going there. And then eventually I started going to National Louis. And so during that time, I was dating the guy who eventually became my husband.
Yes.
Yeah, and we got married.
And how old were you when you got married?
I was 21 years old. He was 20, I was 21. He wasn't even old enough to go to our honeymoon. So where we went to go for our honeymoon, he wasn't even old enough to go.
Wow.
So we were young. We were kids when we got married. And then 4 months after getting married, we got pregnant. So with with our daughter, I continued to go to school, but then eventually I had to quit school. So that's how I didn't finish back then.
Wow. So by that time, that's 3 different schools, it sounds like. 3 different schools, 3 different experiences, 1 to 2 major changes, and now married, first child. After having the first child, did you say, hey, I want to try to go back to school? Or did you say, I'm going to just take care of our daughter and work?
Well, with the first child, I was still in school.
Oh, right.
I was still in school for a little bit, and I was actually still working. But I ended up having to leave school, and I can't exactly remember the main reason why. I don't remember if it was financial. It might have been financial, why I had to leave school. But 6 months after having her, I got pregnant again. So, so it was like back-to-back pregnancies. But even though I wasn't necessarily going to a traditional school, I was introduced to a certification. So I kind of switched from degree to now getting a certification as a breastfeeding peer counselor.
Okay.
And then I also got introduced to becoming a doula. And so I went for that certification. So I kind of switched from focusing on degrees to actually trying to finish these certifications. And that's kind of how that switch happened. But I still had a desire in the back of my head to get that degree.
Okay. So with switching to certifications, what led you to become a doula and a breastfeeding peer counselor from information, computer systems, education, like?
I know, right? None of them connect. None of them. So I had a lactation consultant who helped me with Gabrielle. That's my oldest daughter. And so she saw something in me. She saw some potential in me. And she was like, I think you should become a breastfeeding peer counselor. And at the time, I didn't know that was even really a career or how to do it. Again, I'm thinking that you need a certification, a degree, or, I'm not a certification, a degree to do it. But she was like, no, all you have to do is have breastfed for 6 months, which I had at the time. And she said there's a training that you can go through, but there was a cost. and yeah, we didn't have the money for the cost. But she was like, no, you can apply for a scholarship. So she connected me to the Chicago Breastfeeding Task Force. And so I started participating with them as a parent. And they had scholarships. So I applied for the scholarship, and I got the scholarship. And so that's how I took the certification with the breastfeeding peer counselor. And I took that with, it was called Chicago Health Connection, and now it's called Health Connect 1. I took my training through them. It was actually at that time, it was just a 3-day training. It was a 3-day training, then after that you had to volunteer. So I started volunteering as a peer counselor for Cook County, and that's how I finished my certification. But one of the main reasons why she pushed me to do this is because she wanted to hire peer counselors for her program. I was going through Mile Square Health Center for my prenatal care and all of that stuff, and that's what my doctors and everything was at, and I was dealing with their WIC program. And so she wanted to hire me for a peer counselor for their WIC program. So she pushed me to do it and finish my certification, and then I became an employee for Mile Square.
Oh.
Yeah.
Interesting. So she saw it. It's cool how she saw something in you, but didn't keep it to herself and opened the door and gave you information that you were attracted to. But what made you go through with it? Like, oh, this sounds interesting, or
because unknown to me, I was actually helping moms. So, because I had a few friends who had babies after me, and they was having issues with breastfeeding, and I was helping them. And there was a few times I was, because when you're in the WIC program, you got to come back every few months to get your coupons. And so she saw me talking to other moms, and I was just talking. I was just being me. I like to talk, so, and if I can help, I like to help. So that's what I was doing. And she was like, yeah. She was like, well, you might as well get paid for it. And I was like, oh, I can.
why not?
So, yeah.
Joining me on the next In the Arena, the brilliantly talented muralist and illustrator, Ramon Static.
Right, so like culinary arts, visual art, audio art, right? All art connects with the human, with the 5 senses of you being a human being right there.
Join the conversation Tuesday at 7 p.m. on CAN TV Cable Channel 19 and streaming on cantv.org and the CAN TV Plus app. Experience the power of community television.
That's cool. And then the doula certification came next.
Yeah, so after I had my son,
Which was the second or third
the
child?
second.
Okay.
After I had Jeremiah, my second child, she was like, why don't you become a doula? Now, I had been introduced to doula because I had a doula. I had a doula with my daughter, and I was supposed to have a doula with my son, but he was an emergency C-section, so she couldn't be there for that part. But again, I never knew the process of becoming one. And so my doula and now the lactation consultant was like, hey, I think you should become a doula. And I'm like, okay, like, what's the process for that? And so the same organization that I got my certification as a peer counselor had a doula certification program also. So I went through their training. So again, it was a 3-day training, but there was other credentials that you had to do afterwards. Like you had to actually experience labor and delivery. There were certain other courses and reading materials and all these other different things that you had to do in order to complete your certification. And you had 2 years to complete it. Well, unfortunately, I did the class part, but the extra stuff, I didn't have access to that. So I didn't have connections of where I could get people to allow me into the labor and delivery and experience that, because you had to document it and all of that stuff. I didn't have the money for the other courses, so I didn't finish it that time. But then I tried again some years later, and I became a doula.
This is all of your certifications make sense to the degree that you pursued. So bring us into now. We're gonna go. It's after child number 6, right? You've had all 6 of the children.
Yes.
And you're like, I want to go back to school. Was it that moment, or you like, this is still not the time yet, even though all of 6 of my children are here, they in school, they can handle things on their own, maybe not. Bring us into that moment.
So, as I said, I always knew. But at the time, I didn't know what I wanted to go back to school for. Because I knew I didn't want to be a teacher no more. I had worked at my kids' school as a lunchroom supervisor, and it stamped that I do not want to educate anymore. Not these children. Yeah, I passed. So I was confused on what do I get my degree on? Because I was unaware that my degree existed.
Okay.
And so I'm like, I don't know. I was like, I want to go back to school, but I don't know what for. So in 2015, I got a prophetic word. I was called out the audience, and part of it was there was going to be an educational opportunity opened up for me. And so at that time is when I got another opportunity to become a doula. And my husband paid for me to do the doula certification and things of that nature. So after I got the prophetic word, that door opened. So I thought the prophetic word was for that. Like, oh, okay, I get an opportunity to actually become a doula like I want to.
Right.
As I went through that process, got a full certification, everything, things of that nature. Unaware to me, no, that wasn't the door. That wasn't the educational opportunity. So in 2018, I get a text from a friend of mine who was a friend from the school in Michigan. We became friends in school in Michigan and stayed friends even though after I left. She was in my wedding. So we stayed friends. And so she was working for this school. And so she was like, are you an IBCLC? And for those who don't know what that means, IBCLC stands for Internationally Board Certified Lactation Consultant. So basically it's the highest credential. You know how like an RN is the highest for a nurse? IBCLC is the highest credential for a lactation consultant. And I was like, no, I'm not. I said, you have to become an LC, which is just a lactation consultant. Before, there were certain credentials you had to have in order to sit for the exam. And she was like, well, the school that I work for, offers the certification and the credential. She was like, there's actually a degree for child maternal health, human lactation. Do you want to do it? Yes, of course I do. I was like, there's a degree for this?
Right.
Really? I didn't know. And so immediately I started reading. She was like, well, I'm sending you the information. So she sends me the information, and I'm like, wow, Lord. Now I know what I want to get my degree in. This is what my passion. This is my heart. This is, So I looked into it. I called them to get some more information. Come to find out, to apply to the school, the application was free. And so then I told my husband about it.
Which is a plus.
Yes, exactly. So then I told my husband about it, and he was like, well. He was a little skeptic because I still had student loans from the schools that I never finished. So now it's like...
It's like when one door open, you like...
Right. Like, so how are you gonna,
pay for this?
Exactly. So it was kind of like, one of those things where you need your husband's blessing because you're going to need his support through this journey.
That's hard. Because two become one.
Right. So I was like, okay, Lord. I was like, well, if this is for me to go, you're going to work this out and you're going to deal with his heart about, me going to school. So I applied for the school. I got accepted. And I started the journey.
Wow.
Yeah.
So how did you work out the financial piece, though? But still having student loan debt from previous education.
That's just added student loan debt. The Lord just dealt with my husband's heart about it. That's all. It was just accumulated student loan debt.
So in 2018, how old were you when you started?
Girl, you better make me do math.
Are you 37?
I was like 37,
36?
38, somewhere around there. Yeah.
Right. So you are going back to school, and this time you finish. Mm-hmm. And this time you finish with studying something that makes you excited and brings you joy. How did that feel like 20-ish years later, right?
So when initially I got the text, I was ecstatic. Then I was like, Lord, really? You got jokes. Because the opportunity came in one of the most hardest seasons of my life. And so I was ecstatic and excited, but at the same time, I felt like my life was in chaos. At the time, my husband and I were separated, even though I still, talked to him and needed him, because we weren't divorced, we were just separated. And I had a child who was in and out of the hospital, constantly in and out of the hospital. And I was working. I was working part-time, but I was working. And so once the excitement died down, reality
hit. Yeah.
Reality hit.
I know how that feels.
And I was like, out of all of these years, I've been wanting to go back to school.
Now?
Why now?
Because the time is now.
Yes.
In the midst of the storm.
Yes, in the midst of the storm. So I got that information in 2018. So between 2018 and 2019, there were so many things that the door opened for me, like opportunities I had never experienced. And so it was a lot of mixed emotions because how I was raised, it was like, if your house is not in order, then God is not going to bless. So my house was in a whole rampage, and there was a lot of stuff that was going on that was completely out of my control. Like, I couldn't do anything about it. It was just completely out of my control, So I was like, well, Lord, is these really blessings from you? Because it's like how I felt like my career, my exposure was being open. I got to be on a radio interview for the first time, and I had all these different speaking engagements, and people flying me to Detroit and paying for everything, plus paying me, and people flying me to New Orleans, to work on conferences and paying for everything. But my house is a mess.
Behind the curtain, you like, don't look back there.
Right. It's like, let's leave that, that close.
Like, I'm well aware, but don't look back there.
Exactly. So I was confused. But I also felt like the Lord allowed all of these good opportunities to happen because it was such an emotional and draining thing that I was going through in my personal life. So those moments of peace or happiness that I was getting gave me strength to deal with the negative stuff that was happening. And I think that balance helped me stay mentally sane.
I was just about to say that. How did you manage mentally and emotionally during that time? Because school by itself is rigorous. As a person who went the traditional route, like right out of high school, no kids, single, but I can only imagine, like, doing undergrad, like what they experienced, like managing real life times 10.
Yeah.
And still saying, okay, I'm going to focus on turning this assignment on time, writing this paper. Like, what was your strategy?
God knew I needed an online school. I needed an online school because I would not have survived going to a campus during that time. There were times where my daughter was in the hospital getting tests run, and I'm on my phone doing homework assignments. turning them in, submitting them in, you know, because I can't do anything while she's got these tests being done.
Yeah.
But I have a homework assignment that I need
Right.
to turn in. So I'm doing the homework assignment on my phone, you know. And so there was a lot, you know, of that. I remember calling someone from the church for prayer, you know, and I was telling her all the stuff that I was going through, everything that was happening, everything, stuff like that. And I remember her saying, she was like, so what are you taking? And I was like, what do you mean? What am I taking?
Like medication?
She was like, what are you taking? I said, what are you talking about? She said, are you drinking? Are you on pills? Are you? And I was like, and I had to pause. And I was like, what do you mean? She was like, you got to be doing something to cope through this. And I was shocked. I was shocked and I was grateful because at the time, all I was doing was depending on God. I literally was like, God, that's how I'm getting through this.
That's
like,
my pill.
Right, that's my pill. And the fact that it never crossed my mind to depend on other substance to get me through what I was going through, and the fact that someone who's spiritual, because I called you for prayer,
Right.
is hearing what I'm going through, and you just, in your mind, just knew I had to be taking something. Or doing something in order to be coping with what I'm coping
That's a lesson.
with. Yeah.
That's a lesson. Ooh, wee. Janice, as we wrap up our time together in this moment, what would you tell the 21-year-old Janice about your life now?
21-year-old version of me. Basically to trust God. Because the journey you have in your head is not the journey He wants you for. And you're stronger than what you can't even imagine. You're so much stronger than what you imagine. Because I didn't think I was.
You should hug that girl. You should hug the 21-year-old Janice. I feel like different parts of you need a hug. We not only survived, but you have entered into your 40s like, here I am. Like, I'm ready now. I have so much lived experience, and my life has turned or is turning a corner towards joy and me operating in my purpose, and people along the way seeing me and say, hey, have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? Which is so encouraging for those who are listening and may be curious about, I don't know what I'm going to do next. But tune into those who may be encouraging you. They may see something in you that you don't see in yourself yet.
Yep.
That's one of the takeaways that I'm taking away from your journey.
And don't be afraid to switch. We get so used to, and we're afraid of a switch because we're not accustomed to it. We're not familiar with that area. You couldn't have told me that I was going to be a lactation consultant helping women breastfeed 20-some years ago, or in labor helping a woman push.
That part.
Yeah, right. Experiencing that, you know. So don't get stuck and afraid of a change, even if it doesn't look like your old self.
We are definitely going to end on that note. Don't be afraid to switch, to pivot. And what I hear is don't compare your new self with your old self. Hope you all took notes, and thank you for tuning in.